Hi everybody, I'm back with a quick Merlin minute, and what you can see is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of Python using a tool called nmap, network map, which is effectively a port scanner at layer 4 of the OSI stack. We can plug in an IP, for example, the Cisco Catalyst Cisco Catalyst 9K 101020 scan it, and then print the open ports. Now let me do this. As you can see, it's just 7 lines of Python. Then I say Python3 port scanner.py. It's going to pause here. I'm also over the John's infamously slow DSL, but just give this a second, and what you're going to see is a scan of all the ports, and then a JSON report of what ports are open. Now my next step, as you can probably guess, is to bring this, what you see here, into Merlin. So what do we know? Well, port 22, SSH is open, 179 is open, for BGP it looks like, the bridging gap protocol, and 443 is open. We know this in one Python command that's 7 lines of code. You yourself could make a port scanner. I'm trying to make a video series to go along with my latest Packet Pushers blog post titled Infrastructure as Software. And the first post was explaining applying a software design principle, model, view, controller, to network automation. What you see on the screen here on the left, this is a view, the Merlin on-demand center. And remember, the view interacts with the controller, and then the controller runs the automation and feeds the model, or our database. I haven't got to that step yet. In this case, what I usually do is add my controller view interactivity first, where I can push a button, this network map button, and then in the right, you'll see that I have the results in JSON of the TCP and the UDP network map output. What I'm going to do first and next is make a model and show you how to make a model, migrate a model into the database. Stay tuned for more Merlin minutes. Now that we have the JavaScript object notation and the schema that it forms, we can make our model. So in every Django application that you install and create, mine is called Merlin, you're going to have a models.py file where you have your models. Now, as you can see, I've made a new class, which is what we have to make as a class in Python, called nmap from models.model. I always include the PyATS alias and operating system and timestamp, which is a date time field, very important to date timestamp these things. And then you have to return I return all of these values in a template you can see all those fields. So there are 9 total fields. There are 8, right? You can count 8, but don't forget the outer value. We want the port as well as all of these individual keys and values. So that is what the model looks like. How do we move it into the database? Well, I'm using a Docker Compose system, and in my script, the last thing my Docker container runs, when it spins up, you can see these critical commands. Manage.py, make migrations Merlin, migrate Merlin, and then I do one more migration just to make sure everything's been migrated in. Now again, we have added our model to our models.py file, and in admin.py, I've also registered that model into the Django's batteries included admin page so we can explore the database once it's been added, this table. So let's go ahead, and I haven't talked in my article yet about Docker. I will, but for now, just realize that in one command, we'll bring up this whole project. Later articles will cover the containerization, but for now, let's focus on this migration. And the server is up and healthy, but look here. This is what I want to point out. This is what the make migrations command is doing, is making all of these migrations in an initial Py file. There is our nmap, the new model, which is great news. And then further down, this is the actual migrations command, bringing everything into the database. So now let's see, and I'm going to take the magnifier off if I can find the thing, and let's see what that table looks like in the admin panel. So we go to our localhost /admin, admin, and hey look, there's a new nmaps. Now it's empty, but if I click add, there are our 9 fields and the timestamp. Now if you remember, in the very first clip, I showed you the pretty print version of the Python-nmap JSON that it discovered. Now that in itself is not magic. You have to import pprint, and then what we simply do is our IP address, we set up our scan, and then we pretty print the output of that variable down to the UDP key or the TCP key. You follow? So our next step is to save the JSON we've discovered into our database. Now, look at the code is actually less almost than the pretty print. So we need to bring in our nmap model, and with those variables that contain the JSON, we simply loop over each one of them, and we set up a new variable that is an instantiation of our model, and for each of those 9 or 11 keys that we have, we set them up as that TCP port and then conf, or for the port itself through the iteration. Then we just say .save, and it saves it into the database. All right, now let's see that code in action. I gotta click the button and move fast here because this takes a little bit of time. Hopefully it's less than a minute, but it's doing those nmap scans now. And you'll notice that the database table is empty. There's nothing in nmaps, 0 maps. And the spinner's still running, it's scanning, Remember, we're putting this code into action where we're going to store the nmap in a variable and then loop over the JSON and save each record found into the database. Hopefully it happens soon. And this is partly my DSL's fault, but it is also scanning 2,048 ports, TCP and UDP, 1024 ports each. Okay, so here we go. It has finished the map and the scan, and now if we refresh our database table, check it out. It found port 22, 443, 53, and 123. Stored in the database now with that code that we explored. Wonderful. To wrap things up, let's take a look at views. Now in my article, I talk about three different components having a relationship. The URLs, which is what we're looking at, which is a path, and the URL we want our user to visit. In this case, let's make a view for all records in this table. So we call views nmap all. In our views file, we make and define a function here that is going to query the database and get all objects back, and then render this HTML template. Now in the template, I simply loop for each port in the nmap list, add a table field to a table that I'm building. Now this is a special table called a data table that I've imported from datatables.net. You can see it has an ID and it has a JavaScript. Well, let's take a look at, this is what it looks like in the database. Well, this is what nmap/all looks like. All records from this database. And we can sort and search and filter. We can search here. We can add rows. We can send this to a PDF file. We can do amazing, amazing things from this data table. So thank you for joining me on this supplementary video series to follow my packet pushers art. Look at, say, the all template, right? It's just all of the records. Well, if I go to, say, the month record, it's for the year and the month. And this renders this in the browser. So let's take a look quickly. This is the database with 3 open ports. This is /all. Well, we can see, what about anything found in 2021? Or the month of October? Or the 9th of October? Or even for this particular device. Now these are data tables where we can sort and search and filter and find, and we can rearrange them, and we can copy them to our notepad or our clipboard. We can get a CSV file of them. We can get them right in Excel. We can get them as a PDF. We can even send it right to our printer. Pretty incredible stuff. Compared to the old nmap at the CLI, isn't it? All right, many more views to come. We're just getting started. Hey everybody. We've looked at a simple view of all records, but that might overwhelm our users. What I think is very powerful is this idea, again, of URLs, views, and templates. Well, if you look at these URLs, this is really interesting. We can actually set variables as part of the path in the URL. For example, year or year month down to year month day. We can do it on the operating system. We can do it on the alias. So this is what the URLs look like, and then you'll always see their views dot and then the view. So we hop into our views, and I've separated them out so you can see them a little better. But this is our all, and you can see that our query against the database, Pythonically with Django, is objects.all. Well, what's interesting is we can do objects.filter, and then for year, we go into the timestamp key, __ year equals year, what the user puts into their browser URL calls this view, which then renders the template. Building on the concept of our views, and specifically that filter option that I showed you, there's one more very powerful library we can add to our project and to Django called Q. Now, if I could boil it down very simply, what Q is like a complex, compounded OR statement, as in and, or. And I'll show you the code. Remember, URL, which is search in this case, views, and the template. So let's look at the code. And what I do is in Merlin's URLs, I point to a sub URL and break my whole project into modular components. So my search has 4 views. And in my views, let me show you, don't be overwhelmed here. Objects, filter, and then using Q that I import from models database, Django, I can chain together Q and then a field I contains the query that the user typed in. Now that might seem like a lot, but it's actually very simple. And you're thinking to yourself, Let's search for TCP wrapped. It found two open ports, 22 and 443, that are TCP wrapped ports. Exciting! Our own Google-like search engine. Okay, this will be close in a minute. Let's click the button and then I'll explain what's happening here. So I love detecting changes in network state automatically. And that's what's happening here. So let's look at the code, right? We have in Merlin, we point to changes, which has its own set of URLs and its own set of views. Now, what I'm doing here, and let me find the code, is I'm using the timestamp key, and I'm collecting all of the records with the same timestamp. And then I'm filtering out, using that timestamp, every value except for the timestamp itself, because otherwise there would always be a delta because the time has changed. I run my job, my PyATS code, to go get the new port scan. I do the same thing and then check this out. We can use dot difference in both directions to see if anything's been removed or if anything's been added. Now, I don't know if it's done yet. No, it's still spinning here. Okay, there we go. Well, check this out. These ports have been added. 622 and 830. Isn't that just incredible? Okay, real quick. What you're looking at now is one of my favorite things, which is sort of external to Django, and it's called the Django REST framework, which lets us build our own API. So you're looking at the URLs here, and they're a little different where we have to router register from the REST framework importing routers. And you can see I've added nmap, and we still have a view though. And in the view, it's pretty simple actually. We have the query set, which I've decided to be all nmap objects ordered by timestamp, and a serializer class. Now the serializer is its own Py file, and this is what it looks like where we serialize all of the individual keys from our model. Now what this looks like is an API like this, and we can click on nmap and get the JavaScript object notation version. Now I'll follow this video up quick with other ways we can consume this API. Now yes, right in a browser we can get to this JavaScript object notation. We can also hop into Postman and check out the API and click any one of our APIs, including the new nmap API. Fully usable in Postman. We can stay right inside of VS Code now and launch Thunder Client, make a new request, right? HTTP, localhost 8000, API, nmap, send, boom, right in VS Code. We don't even have to leave our IDE anymore. If we want to get really fancy, we could hop into, Python 3 here, import requests, set up nmap equals request.get, HTTP, localhost 8000, API, nmap, boom, nmap. That worked. nmap.content. Boom, there we go. And now we can automate the automation, and our developers now have access to the nmap JSON without ever having to run nmap. Hi everybody. Again, at the heart of Merlin is the idea of taking network information, in this case our nmap results, and giving it to the business in business-ready documents, spreadsheets, Excel files, CSV files. So these are three views. Now remember, we need a landing view, and then we need a response view for the button click, and a response view for a different button click, meaning get all records or just the latest records. Again, we see views dot, so let's go look at those views, which I've separated for us. So our landing page simply renders the page with the buttons we want the users to click, and then these pages are the responses to those button clicks. Now what we're using is CSV Writer, okay, in combination with a query set, where in this case I want all values, and then all of the values from my model, or I can filter on just the latest timestamp, and then use that as a filter, timestamp equals latest timestamp, dot timestamp, and then the values list. So let me shut this magnifier off, and I'll show you here. So the user just goes to /CSV, and let's get the latest nmap records. Boom, CSV file, ready to go. Pretty cool, right? Now my last set of views in the nmap series are the latest records. And by now you can probably have a sense on how this is done. We have a URL, latest nmap, which calls the views nmap latest. Here is the views where we have our latest timestamp, where we go get the latest timestamp. Because timestamp is a date time field in the model, we can use .latest. Pretty nifty. So then we set up our filter using that timestamp and go get all of the records. I return this as context so that when I render the HTML template, this latest HTML page, context will be returned, meaning nmap list can be used here to say for port in nmap list. So now when we go into our latest center and click on the latest nmap, we actually have the latest records that we can sort and search and drag these around, and again print them to a PDF or an Excel, or print them to our printer. We can, again, just incredible. We can search here. If there was many records, it would all be paginated. So that is the series on nmap, and I will be putting these videos on a YouTube playlist so that you could watch them all in order. Thank you for staying with me during these Merlin Minutes.